Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Joining me today on the show from just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is Sammy Carlile. Sammy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ray.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here on the show. In a conversation with both Chris Palmieri and Greg McComas, both of those guys recommended you as a guest. And when I saw your layout and your photography, I knew exactly why they had said that you would make a great guest. You've got excellent photography and a beautiful layout, and I'm just excited to talk to you about all of it.
Well, good deal. Yeah, being mentioned with Chris and Greg, that makes me feel good in its own right there.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah, that's great company to be in. And Greg and Chris had great things to say about you, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you and your layout. So let's get right into it. How did you get started in the hobby?
Well, that is a very deep question. It's sort of like an onion. It's got many layers to it.
Well, let's start peeling them back.
Well, I happen to like onions, so they're not too bad, especially if you fry them and make them into rings. They're pretty good.
There you go.
I was fortunate enough to grow up in a town, and I had a railroad track basically right in my backyard. The train came through twice a day. It was on the Midland Valley Main Line, which was taken over by the Missouri Pacific in the, I want to say, late 60s. So I grew up on the Mopac and watching a local freight go by sometimes, most of the time, twice a day before they got to where they cut business back, because it was on a branch line. So, I mean, I didn't see any huge trains or anything, 5 or 6 cars. So I remember when I was like 3 or 4 years old, gravitating to see that train go through the backyard. It was great. And then, of course, my parents, they noticed that I'd kind of taken a liking to that. So I was fortunate enough, I think, for my 4th Christmas, I got a Lionel HO scale train set. Of course, for a 4-year-old that going into the hobby for the first thing, getting an HO scale train set was probably a bad choice. I was rough on it, and I probably didn't treat it like I should have, because it's kind of finicky, and Lionel HO scale equipment wasn't known to be very good back then. So it was shortly thereafter I got a Lionel train set, 027, and that stuff is way more robust and easier for small hands to, quote, play with. And before I knew it, my dad had made me I think it was almost a 4x8 sheet of plywood in a spare room in our house. So I had my own train set up. So I thought that was just great. I got more stuff through Christmases, birthdays, doing good in school and whatnot. So I was a Lionel modeler for, 2 or 3 years. Probably turned 8 or 9 and went back to HO because, of course, Lionel's just not nearly as real looking as it needs to be with that third rail down the middle of the track. And that's sort of how I got into model trains. And also being very fortunate growing up, my parents, they like to travel. And starting in the mid 80s, I think it was 1982, I got to take my first trip on the Amtrak long distance train. We rode from Newton, Kansas out to Los Angeles, and then from LA up to the Oakland area, and then Oakland all the way back to Chicago, and then Chicago back to Newton over about a week and a half period. And I remember very vividly, because when you get on the train at Newton, Kansas, going west, it's the middle of the night. Dark. So, of course, you got to wake up early to get put on the train and settle down. We rode coach. So I remember when the sun came up, it was out around, Garden City, Kansas, maybe Dodge City out there. But I remember saying, man, this is really, really cool. And we got into New Mexico, into Albuquerque. And like I say, that was back in the early 80s. The Santa Fe still had a huge presence in the Albuquerque area. And seeing all the trains out there, just it made an indelible mark. And it sticks with me to this day. Going out to the western New Mexico and Arizona, seeing all those cool Santa Fe trains. So that's basically how I was drawn to the Santa Fe, seeing the actual railroad in action. And we rode the train 3 years in a row, going to different destinations. And every time we'd leave out of Newton, Kansas, and they've also got or had a good presence back there. It was the terminus for several branch lines. So I remember driving by the engine servicing facility and seeing all those blue and yellow locomotives out there. And then when you got on the train, you'd weave through traffic and you'd see all the traffic on the mainline railroad on the double track going up to Chicago. And so it was kind of natural for me to be drawn to the Santa Fe after seeing them up close and personal 3 years in a row. So that's kind of what drove my love to the Santa Fe Railroad. I mean, I like a lot of railroads, but I mean, Santa Fe is obviously what I focus most on.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'm sure in that train trip, as you do when you take those, just the amazing places that the train goes through that you don't get to see from anywhere else. And then, you were able to get that exposure, not only just seeing them, but seeing them real up close and, those intimate spots.
Oh, it was great. One of the first things I remember when you leave Albuquerque, you go about 30 miles southwest until you join the Transcon main line. And the Santa Fe always treated Amtrak really good because Amtrak gave performance incentives. So the dispatchers always did really good about threading the Amtrak trains through all the freight traffic. So as soon as you join the main line out there, you usually get threaded around, 3 or 4 trains. But I remember seeing the trains sitting there waiting on us. And I remember seeing that up close and personal because the sun's still up and nice and bright, and you're in a sort of like a semi-desert, arid location. And the further west you go into Mexico, there's really large sandstone mesas. So the scenery is just awesome. But on the double track out there, the coolest thing, I mean, the Amtrak train's clipping along at 79, 80 mile an hour, and you meet one of those piggyback trains that are running 65 or 70, and it's just whoosh, it goes by so fast. And I still remember all those white speed letter trailers just going by the window of the Superliner, like I say, going, you're meeting it at over 140, 150 mile an hour meeting speed. And for a kid seeing that just, you can't get anything close by driving or flying. When you meet a mile-long train going the opposite direction at a high rate of speed, it's just so cool. I mean, I still remember that, and it's been, 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah, the impression, that you got, and the impression of your face up against that window as they're flying by, I'm sure there was a lot of things to remember about that.
Right. Sitting in the coach seat was cool, but my dad, he got up and went and walked around the train. I was sitting there with my mom, and he came and said, "Hey, you need to come with me." And we got to sit in the lounge car. They've got the really big picture windows with these swivel seats. So once I discovered the lounge car, that's pretty much where I stayed. And, of course, it was a simpler time back then. I remember my dad, he's sort of like me. Still to this day, he can walk up to a stranger and have a 30-minute conversation about anything. But he talked to one of the conductors, and he said, "Hey, the kid right there, he's going to be sitting in that seat probably most of the trip. So, but I'm not going to be around all the time. Is that going to be fine?" And the conductor, he nodded his head, and he told me, as long as I sat right there and didn't bother anybody and got up and play around, I was pretty much welcome to stand there as much as I wanted. So there's a few times I remember my old man came to the lounge car and told me, "Hey, you need to come back to the coach so you can get some sleep," because I'd stay there 2 or 3 hours after sunset just watching all the lights outside. You passing the train in the middle of the night, still pretty cool. Oh yes, yeah, that must have been amazing. Was your dad a train guy too? Not really. My dad became a little bit of a train guy when he noticed that I was really caught up in it. He really appreciated a lot more then. He's always supported me greatly. Both of my parents were just great as supportive. Like I say, I don't know how I was able to swing getting a 4x8 sheet of plywood on an old card table in a spare room in our house, but I did, and it kept me busy, and my dad was an airplane guy. He was an Air Force guy and worked for the airline as a airplane mechanic specializes on Pratt & Whitney airframe. So, but he really liked trains once he realized that really took an interest in them. And he, every once in a while when he comes over to the house, I mean, he's over 80 now, but he'll say, "Hey, what's been going on in the layout?" And he'll come out in the layout room, kind of look around. He just shakes his head. He said, "I can't believe you've done all this." So it's a testament, to his support. And he taught me how to use my first jigsaw and circular saw. And by the time I was 10 or 12, I was cutting my own wood with that stuff. So he kind of showed me how to use it, and he trusted me that I wasn't going to cut my hand off or anything. I did this.
Well, it's certainly momentum that he started, with the model train stuff, and then exposing you to the prototype as you're traveling, and then you mentioned we were talking before the show. He also helped some momentum by putting a camera in your hand.
He did. It was a cheap piece of junk camera, and it never really would have worked right. And on one of our trips, I remember, I believe it was Sacramento, California. We were waiting on a train, and he said, "Hey, let's go down the street here." And we went into a pawn shop, and because the camera he had been using crapped out, it quit advancing, and the film was jammed up. So he was tired of the piece of junk camera. So he went into a pawn shop and probably overpaid for this camera, but he got it was almost top of the line back then. It was a Canon AE1 program camera, and the old guy, I remember him standing there trying to tell my dad how to use the camera. And we got home, and most of that film he shot through that camera, it was just trash. He didn't know how to use it. And of course, here I am, 8 or 9 years old, and I'm picking on my old man saying, that guy told you how to use that. How come you didn't do it? And he finally got fed up with my mouth, and he said, "If you think you can take pictures of this camera any better than I could, I'll give it to you." Mm-hmm. So I was pretty resourceful. I took that as a challenge, and of course, I had a library card. I got on my bicycle the next day, and I rode up to the library and found a book on that camera. And I read through the book, and I thought, okay, I think I've got the gist on how this thing works. And I told him, I said, "Hey, I'm going to take pictures with this thing, and they're going to be good enough to hang on the wall." And he went and bought me a roll of film, and I rode around on my bike just around town, just taking, regular pictures. And all the pictures turned out pretty good because I had actually read the instructions. So that was a source of contention, because my mom picked on my dad after that too, saying that that kid mastered that camera. I mean, I didn't even come close to mastering it, but the fact that all 24 of those pictures were decent pictures, because I learned about film speed, ISO, aperture, depth of field, whatnot. So the things that I learned reading that book back when I was a little kid, they still pay off to the day, because even with the technological advances in the digital cameras, I still like to use it in all manual mode, because you've got so much leeway to play with as long as you know how to use all those dials and settings.
I want to point out to any younger listener that may be hearing this, and maybe even some older ones that have kind of forgotten, your story of going to the library with a library card and doing research is how we got things done prior to so if anybody remembers, what was the world like before the internet? That was what the world was like. You had to get on your bicycle with your library card, go down, talk to the librarian, have them point you in the right direction, and hopefully you found a book that was that's how it got done.
I actually remember the trip. I did not talk to the librarian.
No.
I went to the Dewey Decimal System, and I looked up in the Dewey Decimal System where the books were. So I went to the photography section, and they actually had a book on that line of cameras. And I was one of these people that, instead of having somebody hold my hand to do it, I'd just kind of see if I could figure it out on my own at first. But yes,
right.
Life before Google, it was quite different. Yeah. And you did not have instant gratification. When you took these pictures, you would have to wait a week, because you'd have to drop the film off in a little box. And of course, I take after my old man. I'm cheap. We didn't want to pay for 1 hour photo. 3 or 4 days is fine, and it's about $3 or $4 cheaper. So
right.
You got to wait 3 or 4 days for that. They came back in yellow and blue envelopes,
Yep.
and they came out, and I was so proud when I got to look at my pictures. And of course, I wound up taking photography in high school, so I was a step ahead of everybody there, and I got to learn how to develop my own black and white film. So that was another cool chapter in my life, learning how to do that, doing the blocking and shading and the burning and the dodging. learning how to use all those photo flow chemicals. That was quite a time back then. Now it's all been simplified and for the better, I'm sure. But there's a price you pay for progress.
Oh, sure there is. Yeah, and the funny about progress, it makes me think of the I think the meme that was floating around the internet a while, and maybe it's still floating around somewhere, but somebody had a picture of a roll of a film, 24 exposures, and it says 24 exposures, 6 great photos. And below it shows a memory card, and it's like 2,000 photos, six keepers. It's like, yeah, it doesn't change. You just get to take a whole bunch of more, bad photos and still keep 6 of them. So, but yeah, it certainly, I did not do a whole lot of photography in the film. I mean, I did some. That definitely wasn't a whole lot of trains, but I definitely remember that. That got to wait a week or go wait whatever the period is. But for me, it was the local supermarket. My mom would take them whenever she went grocery shopping and drop them off, and you'd wait a week and come back, and then you'd try to learn something if they were bad and try to take pictures again. And so yeah, we are so spoiled in the digital age, beyond what we can even remember. how much easier it is.
All true facts. And my photography teacher in high school, when it was a free project, you take a picture, whatever you wanted to take. I would take pictures of a train, and he would ask me, "Why are you gravitated toward taking pictures of trains so much?" And I explained to him, you got to have a different, a particular sun angle, and you've got to have your film speed just right, and it's a very large object that you have zero control over, so it's very, very challenging, and it's safer than standing next to the side of the highway taking pictures of semis going by.
Yeah, and I think that there needs to be a huge study on why there's such a fascination in general with trains. I mean, I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons why, but yeah, the amazing. I do some on my own train photography, and I see other people doing some really fantastic stuff, and people that aren't trained people are still drawn to train photos. There's just a deep rooted American something about seeing train photography.
It's just a very large object that makes a lot of noise that you don't realize how much it affects your daily life.
Yeah. And you only get one chance.
That's it.
And there are not too many of them. So it's like, it is a challenge. You got to be set up the right spot, the right time, unless you really are connected to the railroad and they'll stop and back up for you. You get one chance at the shot you want.
Ray, I've never had that kind of luck.
No, neither have I. I know there's a few people, some very fortunate people who kind of have those connections or can set stuff up, but never was I, unless it's in 187th scale or whatnot. There isn't the prototype. There is no stopping it. You take what you can get, and I think that's all part of the challenge is planning it out, building some composition and whatnot. But I want to get back to you and your photos, because I know you talk about this. So talk about some of the stuff that you were able to photograph as far as the Santa Fe and some of your more memorable captures in that era.
My big thing was locomotives. Of course, it wasn't my only thing, but that's the thing I sort of gravitated towards. Getting really good photographs of certain locomotives. And when I'd been doing it for several years, I started traveling a little bit. I was fortunate. I got a pretty good job, right out of school, and with a pretty good vacation policy. And another thing that wound up being very positive, the young lady I was dating at the time, which I wound up marrying, her best friend moved to New Mexico for the Air Force. She was stationed out in Albuquerque, so that gave us an excuse to go out to New Mexico 2 or 3 times a year. And I would take my camera and go chase the Santa Fe back then. So I got a lot of coverage out in central New Mexico during that time period, chasing the Santa Fe. And the weather was almost always perfect. One of the best places I've ever been for photography. Accessibility, very good. So you could almost get off the side of the road you had a pretty good indication when the trains were coming just by paying attention. I had a scanner that I could follow the radio with, so I try to position myself. But some of the scenery pictures out there in New Mexico, I'm really proud of. Yeah, of course, you can't get any of that stuff anymore. It's all orange now. The Santa Fe is all but disappeared. I mean, they've been gone for almost 30 years now, so it's understandable. Like I say, more change. But I also did a lot of photography here around the Tulsa area. Santa Fe trains, they had a run-through agreement with the Burlington Northern, and they started running their power through. So I knew the road's good enough around here, and the trains didn't really go all that fast because, they're coming into town, stopping for a crew change. So I could get ahead of them and get multiple shots. Like if I saw a particular locomotive, one of the ones that I wanted to model, I could usually get lucky and get shots of it on both sides in decent light. So if I knew there was something I was wanting to model, or I knew there was a model coming out, if one of those would come through, I'd try to get detailed pictures of it. And still to this day, I reference my photo collection for detail placement, paint differences, and weathering on locomotives that I like to try to create. So it's paid dividends. All those pictures I took during the 90s, I can reference those. Like I was telling you earlier, I reference my own photograph collection almost as much as I reference resources on the internet for modeling projects, and not just locomotives, certain freight cars. Sometimes I would get lucky and have a picture of a certain freight car, or like an intermodal car with a certain trailer or container. It's very handy to have those pictures and to fall back on. Because sometimes you see something and say, I want to model that, and you start looking around on the internet, and the coverage is just not much of it. So you kind of got to take what you can get to get as much resource as you can to build XYZ model as accurately as possible.
Have you been able to move any of your photos over to a digital format?
Yeah. I got lucky, and it was one of the Black Friday deals several years ago. My wife bought a combination flatbed scanner, printer, copier, and of course, all I cared about is how good the scanner was, because I wanted to scan all my some of my better 35 millimeter prints into digital format. So I've shared a lot of those with people on the internet, and I've recently, the last 2 or 3 years, I've been able to devise a way to take digital pictures of my 35 millimeter slides with my camera, and then go in and post-process those in the Photoshop and make pretty decent media to share on the internet. As I say, it's pretty decent. I wanted to test the capabilities of one of them, and my wife was making a picture book for one of our vacations, and she got a coupon for 50% off. And I said, well, I want for my birthday an enlargement on one of the slides that I've digitized. And she wound up getting me, I think, a 36 by 28 inch digital or printed enlargement of one of my favorite pictures I ever took. And it's so big that I did want to spend that much for a frame. So I put it on a piece of plywood with some plexiglass on the front of it, and it's hanging out on the entrance to my layout room. It's pretty impressive, because that's a really large picture to be hanging on your wall, and it's there's not a whole lot of loss in it for a digital reproduced shot of a 35 millimeter slide that I took in May of 1996. I'm pretty proud of how it turned out.
Yeah, tell us about it. I mean, there's an audio podcast, so we got to kind of be a little descriptive. Tell us about that photo. Where was it taken, and what do you see when you look at it?
It was a photo of the Santa Fe's. It's the 891 train, which for people that know the Santa Fe train symbols, the 8 was Los Angeles, the 9 is top priority, and the 1 is Chicago. So that was the train they ran every day for the United Parcel Service with a pretty much a guaranteed delivery. And one of the trips we took to New Mexico, we were on the way home. We stayed in Clovis, and I knew this train was coming because someone had given me a lineup, and I saw this train's consist on the lineup, and I was thinking, man, it'd be great to catch that. And I talked my wife into leaving Clovis early that morning, and we set up out there about 20 miles east of town, and this train came. Usually it was screamed by at 70 mile an hour, but this train came by going very slow, and I thought, I want to get a hold of this train, or ahead of this train, and shoot it against the grain elevators in Bovina, Texas. It's coming through a slight curve with these big, giant white grain silos, and it was slowing down because it was going to pass another train that was ahead of it, going the same direction. But the dispatcher had called that train, said he was going to go on the siding and let this hot shot go around him. And it was 5 very clean super fleet locomotives coming around this curve in perfect sunlight. And I took a telephoto shot of it, and I'm just pretty proud of it. Like I say, it's probably my favorite photograph I took of all time. And I got lucky and got a good composition, and it was coming by about 60 mile an hour, and I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. And I've given that shot to several people, and they've got it hanging up in their layout areas too. So apparently, it's not just me that think this decent. So
it's a super cool feeling too, isn't it? As a photographer, to have people want your photos hung in their houses, it's a pretty wild feeling.
It was great, and then, like I say, no instant gratification. I just fired off 2 or 3 shots with my manual advanced camera and hoped for the best. And one of them came out good, and one of them came out really good. And then I shot 2 cameras at that particular time, so I shot a wide angle of it going by, and I was 3 for 3 on that. I would print those out and give those to anybody because I'm pretty proud of all 3 of the shots. It's just the stars aligned, and I just got lucky.
Did you do 1 hour photo for those, or did you actually have the patience to wait?
No, those were 35 millimeter slides. We had to.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to send those off, and that took about a week and a half turnaround to get those back. Yeah.
That's painful to think about now, isn't it? Like you have to wait a week and a half to see if those come out. Yeah.
It really was. And it really wasn't cheap, to be honest with you. I mean, you spend $6 or $8 for a roll of film, and it was another, I think, $7 or $8 to get it developed. So it's you're already $12 in the hole. So you've got to get a return on that.
You sure hope so. Yeah. So yeah. I'll play a little fantasy as we're talking about photos here and the rail fanning and stuff, which is another, passion of mine beyond the model railroading, obviously yours too. And it's kind of led to, both of kind of go hand in hand. So if Doc Brown was to give you keys to the DeLorean, and you're putting the camera bag in the car, and you're going to take it up to 88 and you're going to go somewhere, where are you heading? What date and what area are you going to? Which one do you really want? Where would you want to go back to?
I would like to have a week to photograph either at Cajon Pass, Tehachapi Loop, or Abo Canyon.
Excellent.
In 1995.
So we're going back to 95. I remember what age I was. I'm sure you do too.
I do too, because that's the era I model. Yep. So I mean, if I could go back with my digital camera, I would get 2 or 3 cameras and 5 or 6 memory cards and 2 or 3 lenses, some really nice glass, and I'd want to spend 3 weeks, a week each at each of those locations, because I've never got to shoot Tehachapi. I've been through Cajon Pass a dozen times, but I've only got to shoot out there once, and I spent so many hours and days hiking up and down Abo Canyon back then. So it's just a great place, and the weather was always good, and a lot of train traffic, and that was back when the Santa Fe was pure, and that's the era I model. So that's the answer to that question. That was pretty easy.
Yeah, and it's a reminder, in sense you were able to capture an era, and sometimes, like, for me, when I look at it, I go, I missed an era, and we talked about this before, the show, but it's also a reminder to keep shooting. If you are into rail photography, keep capturing, because you're capturing an era, which is the modern era for now, but it will be a past era someday. Just keep shooting.
Exactly correct. And memory is cheap, and history fades quicker than anyone realizes.
Yeah, so just keep shooting, keep capturing, and make it your own. There's a lot that's already been done before, but find a different angle and find a way to make it your own. And just keep going, because again, it will be a past era someday, and you'll be looking back and saying, "Hey, I'm glad I was able to capture that."
And the success rate, like we were talking about a while ago, you get 3 good shots out of 24. I'm here to tell you, every great once in a while I go through my slide collection, and I took some stinkers back in. Some of them just didn't turn out the way I wanted, but time has a way of making those stinkers. You think, I can polish these up and make them postable. So some of the ones that weren't all that great that I took in 94, 95, 96, you can run those through Photoshop, and technology keeps improving. And some of those you can actually save and make them worth posting. And so it's the same way with digital.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got room to store it, they're cheap. External hard drives are pretty cheap. And some of this stuff that you might have took a picture of yesterday in 2042, it might not be as bad as you thought it was today.
Yeah. And, or a week or two from now. When never process photos in a bad mood, always be in a good mood. And if you think sometimes you look at a photo and say, it didn't work, but leave it there, because sometimes you'll eventually go back and you'll say, if I crop it this way, if I just take a different approach to a crop, this may work. And you find, like, I've gone back years and just gone back through and stuff that's unprocessed. I go, why the heck did I not process this? Did I forget about? But probably because a moment where I said, stinker, not what I pictured in my head. And now the picture's out of your head, and now you have the actual one in front of you, and then you can make it work. So, boy, we ought to start a podcast just on photography, rail photography. There's so much, and it's yet another passion of mine, but, and it does go hand in hand. If you're a modeler, unless you're doing, complete freelance stuff, you can learn so much from either rail fanning or rail photography. And it seems that you have. So when did you start? You've got this passion for rail photography and rail fanning. How did you start? When did it really start to carry over to your modeling?
Probably in the late 90s. I was out on my own, and it got really hot and heavy in late 1999. My wife and I, we'd been married for a few years. We decided to build our house. Part of the agreement with the house being built, I told her she could pretty much pick any floor plan within reason that she wanted, as long as it had a 3-car garage, so I could have plenty of room for a train layout without parking a vehicle in it. So I conned her into that, and it worked. God bless her. So starting when I built my first layout, I had it up and running, about mid-2000. I was able to run trains on it, and I started building scenery on it. And certain areas of the layout, I envisioned, hey, this is going to be a good place for photography. So I started making the connection really hot and heavy about then, learning how to compose a shot on a model railroad, altering scenery. So there would be nothing in the foreground, so it would be a nice place for a broadside shot, or building scenery up to a curve to try to hide the fact that it's a 30-inch radius curve, which in the prototype is unheard of, except for in industrial areas, and dealing with the space you're provided to try to make it look good through the camera lens on the model. But that's probably when it really started clicking. And that first layout, it was kind of like learn as you go. I built several layouts before then, but that was my first serious layout. So I ran trains on that for 4.5, 5 years. It was based on wide open spaces of New Mexico with a few mountains, some bridges. So I built specific scenes just to be places for photography.
So when you as you so eloquently put it, you con your wife, you get this space. Did you certainly didn't have a plan with you saying you conned your wife. So did you have a track plan going into this then once you had that done?
And as soon as she picked the house plan and I figured out what my dimensions of the garage and how it was going to be laid out, I pretty much started the track plan that night.
Strike while the iron's hot, I guess. Make sure that
correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it all happened pretty fast. We had decided we'd bought this part of land in November of 98. And by January of 99, the house was started. The land was cleared and the house was started. And we moved in on August 28th of 1999. So it all happened pretty quick. Of course, during that time, I had torn down my layout at our other house. I had a smaller layout. So I had packed everything away to make the trip with as little damage as possible. So between packing that away and I was still building some stuff during that time period. I had some projects going on, but I spent a considerable amount of time on that track plan just to build my first real layout, so to speak, in a larger space.
So when so you said you ran it for about 4.5 or 5 years or so. What was the deciding factor to do something different?
That first layout was based on the Santa Fe Clovis subdivision. That's the one I had spent a lot of time on. That ends just south of Albuquerque in a town called Belen. It runs from Clovis to Belen. There wasn't a whole lot of industry out there. There were a few places here and there to spot cars, but it was mostly just a high-speed main line. It was a single-track CTC all the way with sidings every 7 or 8 miles. So I tried to replicate that starting off, and I was sort of a lone wolf guy. I'd known some people around town, but really on the rail fan side, not really on the model railroad side. I had known there were some people around town, but I viewed myself as just a kid. I was young back then, and I was part of a club for a short while, so I kind of made some connections. And then one day I was at the hobby shop in Tulsa, and a fella come in there and he said, "Hey, I know you." And I'd seen the guy around, but I didn't know him. And I shook his hand, struck up a conversation. He said, "You need to come over to one of our operating sessions." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Oh yeah, well, we get together once every other month and have a big operating session on a club layout." And it was a club called the Claremore and Southern. And that gentleman, his name was George Malsby. He's no longer with us, but I owe him a lot of thanks. He gave me that first invitation to come run on the club layout. And that was a very large club layout. I think it took 18 or 20 people to run it. And there was switching in every town. And he kind of took me in and showed me the ropes. And, of course, first time I went over there, I just ran road trains that just went from point A to point B. There were CTC signals on the layout. So you just followed your signals. Of course, I'd rail fanned a lot, so I knew how to read signals, so that wasn't that big of a deal. It's something else I take for granted because there are people out there that don't know what the certain signals mean to this day, which boggles my mind. That's a whole other story. But then the next time I went, of course, he told me I could come back anytime. So the next time I went, I got there early so I could sign up for a road switcher train. Of course, I'd never done anything like that before, but I did a little bit of research on it through Model Railroader magazine, and the operations bug kind of bit that night. I spent 3.5 hours taking cars out and dropping them where they went in this one particular town, and then picking up the cars you're supposed to pick up. And I thought, this is really cool. And within the next 3 months, I'd pretty much decided to tear down my Clovis subdivision layout and rebuild it into something more operations friendly. And I'd seen an article of, I forget who it was, but somebody had a double deck layout, and I thought that was really, really cool. I could get a lot more mainline run and in my garage, because you get dealt a deck of cards basically, and I got dealt a pretty generous space. But even though my first layout was pretty cool, I could run some really long trains on it, the main line run wasn't all that great, and I wanted to maximize that the best I could. So I came up with a plan to do an around-the-room helix. Somebody coined it a nolix.
Yep.
I was scared to death of building a helix, one of the hidden, the spiral where you hide your helix and it takes up a big space I couldn't make that work on any plan. So I devised a plan just to use the whole layout as a helix on a continuous climb. Keeping the grades somewhat tolerable where I wouldn't have to use helpers, because I decided that I was going to model the Hereford Subdivision. It's got a lot of agriculture, switching, grain elevators, anhydrous ammonia, meat packing plants, stuff like that. They grow a lot of wheat and grain out there and feed a lot of cows. So I was kind of drawn to that. I just had to figure out a plan to make it work. And the operations bug, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I went from basically running trains in circles to devising a plan to make your trains actually have a purpose. And of course, some people go really, really, really deep into that, but I tried to keep that simple, because one of my goals was to build a railroad that someone could come in, because I knew how it was going to work. Word gets around that you build a railroad that you can switch cars on. Everybody eventually wants to come try. So I wanted to make mine as simple and foolproof as possible. I don't use car cards. I use pre-printed switch lists, because car cards are just intimidating to me, especially when you've got a handful of them and you're trying to sort them out and you throw them on the floor. That's never happened to me, but I've seen that happen to a few people, and it's like, I want to do even simpler than that. So that's pretty much how I got into the operations bug, through operating on the Claremont Southern layout, care of George Malsby. So, and of course, you show up to a thing like that and you start meeting all kinds of other people, and before you know it, you've gotten yourself into the network, and you get invited to go to other op sessions, and you've got plenty of people that you can invite to come to yours. So it was a multifold, fortuitous situation, so to speak, to use big words.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, once you get out of the lone wolf status, and certainly I've mentioned it before in other shows, there's certainly nothing wrong with having a layout for your own, and if it satisfies your own needs and that's your private time, that's certainly your prerogative. But if you really want to advance your modeling or learn more, or just be connected and just enjoy what seems to be just a great network of people in this hobby, get yourself out there and shake some hands and bump some elbows along them, at either at a club or a private layout or wherever it may be. When you have an opportunity to go see these, take that opportunity and see it, because there's always seems to be a takeaway from any layout that you go to.
Oh yeah, I learn something every place I go to. In fact, I've been to some places multiple times, because I like going back to those places, because either I really like their layout, or I've got a connection with the layout owner. But there are several layouts that I go back every chance I get, and I notice something different and learn something new every time. I mean, you can't paint yourself into a corner and say things are certain ways. You've got to be open to just see things, or you're going to miss little details that you wouldn't see otherwise. And like you say, calling it the network, I've been so fortunate to meet so many people, really, really good people, because of the hobby and the operation side. I mean, if we had this talk in 2005, when all this started for me, and you would have told me, hey, by 2022, you're going to have visitors. I think I'm up to visitors from 29 different states and 4 foreign countries visit my layout. Amazing. I mean, a virtual unknown guy that lives up in the sticks northwest of Tulsa, to have all these people want to come visit me, I would have told you were crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Just just how quickly it snowballs, because it's this person that knows that person, and before you know it, it's just a chain. It's the reason why you're on this podcast now, is the Model Railroad Network that works just so amazingly that we're all seem to be, I don't even what they call it, the 7 degrees of separation. I don't even know if you have to go 7 degrees anymore.
Right? No, it's the exact opposite of Fight Club. They say don't talk about Fight Club, but everybody does it.
Right? Yeah, you do talk. There may be some elements you leave out, but we'd certainly talk about the layout itself. You may not talk about some of the conversations that are there, but and some of the bad advice that's handed out personally, but it's definitely a great thing. So I want to make sure we cover all this, because one thing I want to make sure we get on. You did 2005. You decide, okay, we're going to do something completely different here, and you go to the Hereford Subdivision. Did you spend some time out there? Is it just something that you knew, or did you go looking for a subdivision off the Santa Fe? Because obviously it was going to be the Santa Fe for you. We figured that out in the last 50 minutes here or so. What led you to the Hereford Subdivision?
That was always on the way from or on the way to Albuquerque, the trips that I'd take out there, because U.S. Highway 60 pretty much follows the Santa Fe from basically Mountain Air, New Mexico, all the way to Amarillo, Texas. And you're never more than 3 miles away from the main line on the highway. So I had noticed that on my trips to and from Albuquerque, and I always thought, A, all these grain elevators are cool. B, the hotshot trains run 70 mile an hour, and back then the highway speed was 70 mile an hour, and it was great to pace a train going the same direction, or when you meet one going the other way. And back in the mid 90s, it was still single track, just like the Clovis Sub was, with sidings every 4 to 5 miles. So seeing all that traffic going out there and seeing all those grain hoppers and tank cars and box cars, and there were some lumber yards out there. There was local switchers that worked the subdivision from each direction. There was another switcher that was stationed in Hereford. So it's like, I saw that, but it didn't click to me until, after the second and third trip, I really started paying attention to what was going on. It's like, this would be cool to model someday. And of course, when I decided to tear down and build something different, it was an easy choice. I had plenty of grain hoppers. I had plenty of tank cars. I had all the traffic that I needed. I had plenty of intermodal, auto wrecks, double stacks. I had everything I needed. I just needed to change the scenery and buy some other structures. And fortunately, grain elevators aren't that difficult to scratch build. You go to a big box home improvement store such as Lowe's or Home Depot, buy several sticks of PVC pipe, set up a jig to where you can cut those pipe to where they're universal, pretty much consistent lengths, and you've got grain elevators. You build the head houses out of mat board. They're easy to build, and they're big, imposing structures, and they provide a good traffic base. So that was it was easy. I mean, the railroad's already done the work. You've just got to, make a reasonable duplicate of what they've already done, and visualizing how you want to do that and kind of seeing it come to fruition as you work on it, work the scenery around, move your buildings around, change your track arrangements to where you can, get good switching arrangements out of it. And then you question yourself, is this good enough? And then through the network, I've got all these visitors coming, and I actually had a guy come through, which I consider him a pretty good friend of mine now. He actually worked for the Santa Fe for 40-something years, and he told me, he said, I worked out of Amarillo for several years for the railroad, and I'm really familiar with the territory you're modeling, and it feels like the territory. I walk around in your garage, and I look at these scenes, and I recognize this, and I recognize that, even though I've taken several liberties to make them fit to the model area. But I do have some structures that I've built as close as possible as the prototype, and some areas on the layout that look very similar to what they did back then. And the fact that somebody like that with, who I hold in pretty high regard, he tells me that what you're doing feels like the area out there. It's like, that really hit home. It's like, I'm onto something here. For anybody that's been out there that can tell me that was a huge compliment.
Yeah, that's called seal of approval.
That was exactly the seal of approval. And then several of my other Santa Fe buddies, I the Mike Tomays, the Eric Goodmans, the people like that I've been really fortunate to make friends with over the years, and many, many others to have them come over and point at something. Another good friend of mine, Mark Montre here in town, he's a huge historian. He'll come over and point at something and just kind of grin and give me a thumbs up. It's like, hey, you really did good on that. It's like, man, this is a huge seal of approval for people like that, because they've been doing either photography or chasing trains or reading books, or in several others' case, they model the same thing I model, and we don't do it as a competition, but we all, hold each other in high regard. And to have people like that compliment me on what I've done, that really means a lot. I mean, words can't even describe.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back to the Hereford Grain building that you were talking about, because you've got a picture you sent me, and I'm going to share this out on the Facebook page so that the listeners can take a look at this building. So a couple of things stick out to me, and you had mentioned making out of PVC. Tell me kind of the process, because it's beautifully weathered, and I also see that Hereford Grain. Is this a real company, or is this something that you kind of proto freelanced, or what's the story behind this building?
That kind of like Greg said a few weeks ago, your signature shot of your layout. I probably consider that my signature shot of my layout, because it really puts you in a place, and that elevator, it's a big elevator. Mine is hugely condensed. It's not nearly as long, and it's not as deep as the prototype is. But I decided to make my own decals based on the pictures that I took of the real thing. Of course, I cleaned them up in Photoshop so I could print them off on decal paper. And it's when you see the picture, you'll understand it. But the elevators and the head houses and the superstructure, they're sort of an off-white color. But whoever owns the elevator all these years, they always take care of the painted mural on the side. It says Hereford Grain Company in these big giant letters, blue, so it contrasts against the off-white color of the elevator. But back, I think in the 90s, they started painting the background a bright white behind the letters so it would pop even better. Because the first time I saw it, there were some patches missing. It wasn't that great. But then sometime in the mid-90s, on a trip I took out there, I noticed they had touched up the paint on that thing and spray painted the background where it says Hereford Grain Company a bright white color so the blue letters would pop. And I kicked myself because I didn't get a shot back then of it. I just thought, hey, that's really cool. But then in the mid-2000s, they spruced up the paint again, and I was out there a year or so after they did that, and I made sure to get really good digital photographs of that from a distance, sort of telephotoed in, because I knew someday that hopefully I could make decals off of those pictures. And 2 or 3 years ago, that time finally came where I found some decal paper that I thought was good enough, and that's what makes that elevator is the big letters on the side of it, because there's not that many elevators around the country that have a big painting on the side that advertise who's doing what. So the decals really made that pop. And when I redid mine, I made the decals to where they would fit on the side of the silos. And I did the same thing. I painted the background of where the letters are going to be a bright white. And then I really took my care to kind of weather everything else to where, it looked the way I wanted it to look, basically. But yeah, I probably consider that my signature shot of the layout.
Yeah, for sure. And it definitely is just massive. It takes me to Texas because, I've spent some time in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you go around Fort Worth and down to Saginaw, and, it's just still in that general area, these massive grain elevators, just huge structures. And it's so flat in that area, flat compared to New England, that you just see them for miles and miles, these massive structures. So that when I see that picture, that's where it takes me. I've never been out past Amarillo, but I get that sense that we are, we're in that area, and this is definitely something you would see.
Yeah, I think some people out there call them prairie skyscrapers.
Yeah. And they're just massive. I mean, I'm not familiar with the one out, out on the Hereford Sub, but, just in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in the modern times, if you go to Saginaw, there's just huge, huge, huge elevators. And it just, again, you could be, I don't know how many miles away, but you can be a long ways away and see these things, and they just start getting bigger and bigger.
They dominate the horizon. They do.
They sure do. So,
and they provide a great traffic base too. I mean, it works hand in hand with the railroad. I mean, sure. If you're going to have grain elevators, you've got to have grain hoppers, yep. And you've got to switch those out. So it goes hand in hand. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better marriage. No
doubt. I want to get to this other big point here. We talked about this grain elevator. You started in 2005. When did you think? When about did you have the layout up and running? Were you able to hold operating sessions back on this new version of the layout?
It happened pretty quick, really. Believe it or not, I had two good friends of mine, John and Bill. They would come over and help me cut wood for the bench work, and I kind of overplanned it. I knew pretty much how it was going to work, and there wasn't a whole lot of fiddle-faddling around. My plans, since I spent so much time kind of pining over the details, it went together almost like I had envisioned it. So within probably 6 months, we had the main line down. I mean, there's zero scenery, of course. It's all just open bench work, no backdrops. But I had track down, and because I was concerned about the grades, I wanted to keep the grades around 1.5%. Of course, that didn't work. There were a few places where I had to exceed that to get my deck separation how I wanted it. So I wanted to run trains as quick as I could. So I think we had our first, I mean, I don't really want to call it an operating session, but we had a main line. We had both the passing sidings in, had a few yard tracks. I had the DCC all hooked up and blocked out. I wanted to run trains as quick as I could to make sure they were going to run how I wanted them to run, because at that point, if you've got to make changes to the bench work, it's best to do it then, because once you start into the scenery phase, I'm the type of person, I don't like to tear it down and start over. So probably within the first 6 months, we were doing that, and started switching cars. I had some industries tracks that I had in. So we're kind of, I mean, the way I was working it, I wanted all the gears to mesh. So I didn't want to go too far without having to back up. So I was constantly testing. Every night after work, I'd go out there and fool around for an hour or so just to make sure the things were to my liking. So, yeah, it's as far as the first formal operating session where I had a crew of several people, probably maybe a year and a half into building, because I wanted to see how everything was going to work out. Of course, my operating plan has been changed and refined so many times over the years, because I was always striving for, bigger, better, more, trying to make it, as close to the prototype as possible. I mean, obviously you can't run mile-long trains, but I do like to run trains that are, 18, 20 feet long. So that was the deciding factor on the building, making sure those trains could go up the grade without streamlining or anything horrible like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I watched some of the videos. Steve Davis created some videos of your operating sessions, and I was watching one of them prior to the show, and I was just impressed by, your operating sessions is jam packed. You've got a lot of traffic, which is really cool to see on a layout. Through traffic, you've got the locals, you've got a dispatcher that's got to think things out and stay busy with that. So you got some really great ops going on there.
That's the reason for the whole thing. I want to run trains. I want to have a really good traffic base. Have enough road switchers to keep everybody busy. Have a good yard job. That running the yard down at Clovis keeps two people busy for the whole session. I mean, every once in a while they get caught up, but that's my theory. I like to turn and burn. I mean, some guys, they don't mind coming and running 2 or 3 trains and sitting down, but I tend to gravitate towards the crews that we really like to go and make things really run. In fact, that session that Steve videoed for me the last time, that guy's great. He's a ball of energy, and I had an idea. We would have a 4-hour op session because this area we kind of standardized on 3-hour op sessions, and we'd always topped out around, even with a really good crew, I would top out around 20 to 21 trains for a 3-hour op session. And I had it in my mind, I wanted to go for 28 trains and go for about 4 hours. So the session that Steve videoed, I think he had 4 different cameras set up, and he was walking around with his static camera, getting things that were actually happening. But all these cameras are just rolling pretty much until the batteries ran out. And I think we ran for 4 hours and 15 minutes, and we ran every train on my schedule, which was a total of 28 trains. And it was a total blast. I had a hand-picked crew. I told everybody going into the deal, hey, there's not going to be very much time to set. I had a dispatcher, my dispatcher, Jay Hastings. He was the first one I told it to. I said, hey, you want to try doing this? He said, yeah, I'd love to try doing that. So we did that, and it was a blast. We were all worn out. We all went and ate barbecue when we were done, so it was a well-deserved meal. But yeah, the Santa Fe back in those days, they would run that many trains during a day. I mean, if you say a 3-to-1 fast clock, 12, 24 hours, that's a pretty realistic train count.
Yeah. It was just amazing, the amount of traffic, and boy, that just makes it a lot of fun and makes it, like you said, like the prototype, because if you ever go trackside, and even today's modern operating is still the same in sense. You've got, traffic, you got holding sidings, you've got locals that have got to get out of the way for mainline traffic. And when you have that all mixed into an operating session, it's just super cool to see that. And it was really fun to watch your video. And one of the other things, other than I did notice in some of the pictures that you sent me, that looked like a really good meal after that 4-hour operating session. So that definitely makes it worth the time put in. A huge bonus for sure.
There's a method to my madness. When we get together like that, we try to have a good meal. And back to my wife, even though I say I conned her into things, she is a saint, and she's a very above average baker. So excellent. One of the reasons that people like to come back to my place is for the chocolate chip cookies.
I'll tell you what, if you definitely, that's a good way to keep operators. If you keep them fed well, that definitely will keep you a good operating crew. And you've got a great operating crew, including, and this is what I was really trying to get to, your son being involved in this. So you talked about your dad, and your dad got you started. So talk a little bit about how your son Samuel really got into the hobby.
I got my hooks in him at a young age. He always wanted to come out into the garage and see what Dad was working on, and he had a throttle in his hands at probably 3 or 4 years old. So he has literally grown up around this. I'm really fortunate that he's taken a liking to it. He didn't really want to get into the operations that much until he got a little bit older. His mid-teens, he kind of started asking me, hey, Dad, can I come out and be a part of the op session? Just like, of course.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I thought he just kind of wanted to come out and hang out because, my normal people that have come over time and time again, they've seen him grow up since he was little bitty. Yeah. So he made it clear. He said, Dad, I don't want to come watch. I want to do what those guys are doing out there. It's like, well, all right. I mean, he'd been around it so much, and I didn't really have to tell him the rules because he soaked everything up, and he's really good at it. And now he kind of travels with me when I go to places. We've gone to Denver. We've gone to Kansas City. We've gone to Bella Vista, Arkansas to run on people's layouts. He goes with me on the regular down to Steve Davis's Claremore and Southern. He's gone over to Dale Baker's Port Catoosa Railroad. He goes almost everywhere I go, and he's a really good operator, and he's got a little brother. His little brother's 11, and so far he hasn't taken a liking to it yet. But I know I still might have a chance to get him out there. And
Yep.
you know, he's a little bit younger. He'd rather play video games and, you know, hang out in his room. But that's sort of how Samuel was at that age. But he kind of broke out of his shell, so I'm going to try to go 2 for 2.
There you go. Yeah. It's kind of that osmosis kind of exposure thing, you know. You hope they catch on. I just know the pride I had, you know, a couple weeks ago. I put the throttle of my layout in the hands of my 9-year-old daughter, and just having her she played engineer for me. I was just collecting cars so I could clean track, and it was just so much fun. Just to be able to share a hobby you're so passionate about and share it with your kids and see them, you know, learning it for the first time, and it's just really wild. So that's got to be a great feeling for you to have, you know, your son really into it and being a part of it. And he's been doing some videos and stuff of his own.
He's got a really eye for photography. Yes, he is a very good. He likes to borrow my digital camera. He's got his own. A digital video camera set up, so he's got a really good he's got an eye for that, and I really haven't had to school him very much. One of my good friends a couple of years ago, he said, you know, I've seen some of your son's photography. He's pretty good. And he said, where did he get that from? And I said, you know, it came natural, and truth be told, he should be good because he's been hanging out with foamers his whole life.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets to talk to him. He gets to see their stuff on the internet. He gets to run trains with us on somebody's layout. But there's a double-edged sword to that. He can also be a pretty good critic. Several years ago, he was with me on Jim Sinisi's Kansas City Terminal layout, which is a very famous layout in this area. And we were a two-man crew. We were working the Santa Fe job, I think, or a Santa Fe transfer. And Jim's rule is he doesn't want anybody running very fast because you're on the industrial trackage. And he said, Dad, slow down, because I was the engineer for the first half of the session. He told me to slow down 2 or 3 times because I was going like the speed limit's 10 and I was probably going 15 or 20. So here this kid is shaking his finger at me for breaking the rules. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, he's over there. He's whipping you. He's keeping you in line for sure. I can almost guarantee though, when he learned that camera, he didn't have to get on his bicycle and go to the library, did he?
No, not at all, man.
It'd be one of those tales you get to tell. You know, back in my day.
Walking to school uphill both ways.
Yeah, that ride to the library just gets harder and harder every year, I'm sure.
just go ahead and Google it up.
Yep, that's right. Just Google it up. It's all there. Well, you know, we live in that era. It's fantastic. So, want to talk about your operating crew because you mentioned them as well, and you know that you were talking a bit about just what kind of, you know, tight knit group that you have there. And I wanted you to have an opportunity to talk about that and what you're able to put together for guys that come and help with the layout.
Sure. The Tulsa area, we're really fortunate and blessed. There's many good layouts in the Tulsa area and many different errors. I mean, we've got it all covered. We actually have Operation Special Interest Group, the OPSIG meets. We have those every 2 years, to where people come in and get to see what everybody's been working on. So those are great. But the local guys, all of them are great. I consider most of them my personal friends. Some of them, they're sort of the lone wolf type, but we haven't broken them out of their shell yet. But we've got me. We've got Steve Davis with his awesome Kansas City Southern Third Sub. We've got some guys that run narrow gauge. We've just got a great group of people here in town, and I've been fortunate to run on most of their layouts when I can. So there's so many great guys that just run the gamut. I mean, you've got me and you got Steve that do the heavy mainline stuff, and then we've got people like Jim Sinisi, and we've got Tom Fowler, and we've got Dale Baker that they do the heavy industrial switching. And I mean, you can spend 3.5 hours switching cars in a room that's not hardly any bigger than your living room, A couple of them are in spare bedrooms, and they've come up with all these operation plans that hold your interest for 3 hours. And that's the name of the game. That's why I keep changing mine, because I see things that work pretty good, but I want them to work better, so I change them on mine. But some of these guys, I mean, they've got it figured out. I mean, you can switch 30 or 40 cars and spend 3 hours doing it and have a ball. I mean, we've got a great group in here in town. I mean, it's not a huge amount of layouts, but for the amount, I'd like to think the amount of layouts we have, we've got the quality pretty well covered.
No, that's great. And then, are you on a kind of how often do you get to operate on yours and then the others? Are you on a regular schedule, or is it kind of flexible? How are you doing that?
Some of the guys here in town are on a schedule. I'm kind of ad hoc. I just do it as I have time. Both of my boys play baseball quite a bit, so the summers are kind of shot, but neither one of them play ball anymore. So it's kind of opened my schedule up, but I don't operate near as much as I'd like to. I probably go 7 or 8 times a year. There are a few layouts here in town. They are on a monthly schedule. Some other layouts are by invitation only, because that's the deal here. The only drawback with living in this area is that nobody has basements. So right. You've usually got to go into somebody's house. So that's, when the huge COVID thing hit, that really put a damper on everybody here, because nobody wanted the fear of the unknown coming into their house. I mean, like mine's in my garage, but you still have to come into the house to either eat or use the restroom. So the schedule wise is sort of all over the map. I mean, there are a few layouts in town that I haven't got to operate on as much as I'd like to, but I mean, everybody's got a life. Everybody stays busy. I've gotten into a deal where I do work for other people. I've always got projects that I'm working on for other people. I like to do that because it keeps my skills pretty much fresh, and I don't want to be idle too much. I always like having 2 or 3 projects in the backlog, whether they're for me or for somebody else. So, like I say, back to the original point, we're fortunate we've got a really good group of people, and we're all pretty civil with one another too. So there's not a whole lot of politics.
That's great. That's a huge thing, and be able to share your hobby with others that are into it, and can geek out as much as you do on a layout. It definitely keeps you going. And speaking of, you described yourself in the beginning as what would you say? You were the Santa Fe nerd. Is that did I get that right?
Yeah. I mean, it comes natural. Like I say, I was gravitated towards them, and I did a lot of photography, and I took pictures of things that I always took pictures of certain subjects with the theory of I'm going to model that someday. And so many things that I took pictures of that I thought there's no way they're ever going to come out with this commercially. I would have to kit bash it. But now you're coming out with so many things commercially, so my kit bashes aren't near as good as the commercial product that's coming out. So it's good to have pictures of any subject. If you see something that it might be gone tomorrow, take pictures of it. Get all angles, because you never know when you might use that to build a model of. I mean, even 20 or 30 years later, it's good to have that. But yeah, as a Santa Fe nerd, I mean, when I would travel, I would try to go into the yard offices, talk to somebody outside, say, hey, can you print me a lineup? Getting train lineups to get train symbols. And then I made connections with some other people later on in life. I actually got train schedules, block swapping, what trains stopped where, what trains carried blocks to which terminal. I mean, you can drill down into it as deep as you want to go to be as accurate as you want to get. So I try to, going back to, what Carl said years ago, it feels like it. I like my trains to, if I'm doing a model of the QNYLA train and it had a block that dropped at Kansas City, which does no good for me because that's east to me, but then it had 3 more blocks. One block it would drop in Clovis to be forwarded to Phoenix. I try to do that with my trains. Whether it's a car here or a car there, if the QNYLA was going to drop a block to be put on a different train going to a different location, I've done that with my QNYLA train. It comes down from Amarillo, it stops in Clovis and drops 3 cars to be forwarded to a different destination. So yeah, it's you just nerd out on some of the details, and some people look at it and scratch their head, but the rare few, there's probably 5 or 6 people that have come into my garage and looked at it, and they're familiar with what trains did what. Everything was a tool. So the ones that actually catch that and comment on it, man, that makes my day.
Well, I did notice one of the things you talk about, the amount, the locomotives that were available. You certainly have covered a wide variety of the Santa Fe power that was available, both in a lot of yellow bonnets, a lot of war bonnets. You got a lot of stuff there. I saw a post where you were showing somebody had put graffiti on the locomotive, i.e. putting the letters BNSF on it and getting that removed and getting the Santa Fe put back on there, as it probably should be in your era. What is your favorite Santa Fe paint scheme?
Oh man, it's hard to go against the war bonnet. I mean, when the GP6EMs came out in 1990, that was awesome. I mean, there wasn't a model of that, but I knew there would be someday. The FP45s before that were, repainted, because they started out in the war bonnet back in the 60s when they bought them, but it was the simplified passenger version. And then when Mike Haverty came up with the idea to put the big billboard lettering on the side, man, that just was so cool back then. It was it was such a great era, and looking back on it, it was all too short. I mean, those FP45s got repainted in 1989. The 60Ms came out in 1990. The 500s, they were 1990. Then you had other stuff coming out all the way until the last order of the Dash 9s and the SD75s in 95. And then the merger took place in September of 95. And then some of that stuff started getting BNSF subletters by 96. So if you look at it, it was just a 5-year envelope where everything was just pure Santa Fe with, you've got all kinds of yellow bonnets running around. You've got all kinds of war bonnets running around. It was just a great period. And I've decided that's what I narrowed my focus on, was to model everything as I remembered it in the summer of 1995, because I took 3 trips that year and shot a lot of film and a lot of slides. So I've decided my cutoff date is September 1995. So almost everything on my layout fits in before September 95. So I've made a really stern effort to keep it that way, because I mean, we kind of joke and laugh saying, the BNSF ruined the Santa Fe, which to some people, they take it personal. It did, people that grew up with it. But, I mean, we all still like steel wheel on steel rail. I mean, you can't take that away from us. But, yeah, when the Santa Fe, when the Burlington Northern, when the Southern Pacific, when the Conrail, railroads like that were great independent railroads, when they got folded into bigger systems, some of it died. I mean, it never would be the same. I mean, Chicago Northwestern, Missouri Pacific. I mean, the list goes on. Missouri, Kansas, and Texas. I mean, all those, I've seen those with my own 2 eyes growing up. But when they were merged into whoever bought them out, they were merged, and it never was the same. It was a transition period for 2 or 3 years where you could still see little glimpses of it. But after about 2 or 3 years, man, it's gone. I mean, I'm old enough. I saw the dadgum Frisco going through Tulsa. I still remember those orange and white engines. And then I remember my dad bringing me home a newspaper saying the Burlington Northern bought the Frisco. And within a year, it was all gone. I mean,
yeah.
That goes back to our photography thing. If you see something that you think is rare, electrons are cheap. Take pictures of it.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's just a tradition that nobody's ever going to be a fan of the successor railroad, especially when you're in love with the current, and it happens even in phases. Like, For me, it's, my favorite railroad really is, I'm out of the Providence and Worcester with a little bit of New England Central, but New England Central was always my favorite railroad. And that was something that was taken over from the Central Vermont. And I'm sure there's a ton of people that were, just absolutely devastated that the CV went away and New England Central took over. They came out with blue and gold locomotives, and I loved them. And now those are going away. Now I'm feeling the same thing the CV guys have felt, which is now my railroad's going away. And now it's all going to a G&W scheme. So just, again, but those that went out there and they captured that blue and gold, and maybe they were thinking, boy, I wish this was a CV unit. Now you've captured an era that's gone away too. So yeah, definitely want to keep capturing that stuff. And for your, and then when you build a layout like you've done, you're just able to take that memory and basically freeze it. Now it's a memory that'll live forever in 1/87th scale.
It's sort of an odd group of people that model the 90s, the mid 90s. I mean, there's not very many of us out there, but a lot of us that do model the 90s, we know each other and we've conversed, and it's kindred spirit, so to speak. That's why I'm so fortunate. I've got several friends that model around the same time period, and it's good to have people like that. And I mean, for lack of a better term, it's almost like a brotherhood. I mean, you know who your friends are pretty quick. I mean, some people want to give you a hard time for doing things. Like my buddy Scott Sanders down south, he's a Katy modeler, and he always picks on me because I don't run cabooses. Well, my argument to that is there weren't a whole lot of cabooses on mainline trains in 1995. They were sitting around the yards being used as transfer power or transfer cabooses or shoving platforms. So, it's good to have friends that, you can bounce things off of and pick on, for little things. Just as long as people don't start taking things personal, because, I like the Burlington Northern. They were one of my hometown railroads, but, they got in cahoots with the Santa Fe and it changed everything. I mean, I still fancy myself as somewhat of a Burlington Northern modeler, but I had to give them a hard time because they're green and black, not nearly as classy as the Santa Fe was.
Any better than if the Southern Pacific merger would have gone through?
Yeah, oh man, that would have changed. That would have changed so much. That would have changed the dynamics of everything. But as far as any better, I'm not sure if it would have been any better. I mean, I love the Southern Pacific too, and the Rio Grande. I mean, but man, that would have. I don't know how positive that would have been. The only thing really positive is that the Union Pacific wouldn't have gotten the Southern Pacific and changed them so much, because look how much of the SP is left. I mean, it's dwindling down to nothing.
It was a funny day for me when I was told what SPSF stands for.
Shouldn't paint so fast.
There it is. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, Google that, or jump on your bicycle and ride to the library and look that up. Shouldn't paint so fast. Yeah, SPSF. Yeah. One of the things that I mentioned before we close up is, the connection between my layout and your layout is something that you've got on yours is the B40-8Ws, the GE 4-axle locomotives. And I have the current version of sorts, the three of them that came off of the ATSF or BNSF, bought them from them. I was told an epic story about it, but I don't know. I can't fact check the whole thing, but there was just some wild story about how the Providence and Worcester acquired those 3 locomotives. And one of them went right to the paint shop. One of them actually hung around for a while in BNSF paint, and one came in war bonnet paint, and I think it rode around for a while before it got painted. But one of the features of that locomotive is something that came from the ATSF, and that's the gull wing cab. And talking to the expert on Santa Fe, I wanted you to tell a little bit about gull wings and what you know about them.
Oh gosh, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you what I've read in a book about the gull wing cab. The gull wing cab was devised by the Santa Fe because they had, I think, 2 coal unloading. They were either loaders or unloaders that the coal trains would go through, and they wouldn't clear the corners of a standard GEY cab profile. Like those were on the first order of the 500 class -8s. So they devised the gull wing on the first order of 800 class of C40-8Ws, and they had those tooled up in the factory. So the way the second order of B40-8s, they had the same tooling on the cab, so they wanted to buy some more of those. So they was just kind of got grandfathered onto the design, but it was all for clearance purposes on a either a coal loading or a coal unloading area where the trains would go into a facility that was enclosed. In fact, there was one story. One of them might have been the York Canyon mine, and one of the unloading areas might have been the OG&E power plant at Red Rock, Oklahoma, which is not too far from here. But my memory isn't clear on that. But yes, there were two different cab designs, and since it must have been the York Canyon, because they didn't carry those over very much longer on the BNSF side. So since the Santa Fe pulled out of the York Canyon, well, the BNSF pulled out of the York Canyon because they mined it out. They no longer build cabs like that. But yeah, that's a very cool feature. It's got that little V indention on the roof of the cab, like you say, the gull wing, sort of like if you're in the airplanes, the F4U Corsair had a gull wing type wing arrangement.
Right. Yeah, exactly what it is. It's just a neat little feature that, differentiates it from the others, and, just a neat thing to know about and why. I want to wrap it up here on Around the Layout. We've taken Sammy for a trip that I think we've been here an hour 20 today, talking about his Hereford Subdivision and a beautiful layout. I'm going to include all the links to the YouTube videos. We'll put that all up on Facebook so the folks that are listening can go there and check out this beautiful layout. What's your next big thing for the Hereford Sub?
Oh man, like I said a while ago, I've always got projects in the backlog. My son Samuel, he told me here a while back, he said, "Dad, I want to build a locomotive." So we've sort of been stockpiling some projects that we're going to start on this winter, and I'm going to let him try his hand on getting the old X-Acto knife out and cutting on some stuff, because he wants to build a few simple locomotives, but he wants to do his first kit bash, and who am I to say no about that? So we've got all kinds of things up our sleeve that we're going to build.
Well, he certainly's got the bravery to dive right in there and attempt these projects like that, a kit bash of a locomotive, and that's great, and it's certainly great for you and him to be able to share the hobby together, and you can teach the skills that you've learned and to him, and it sounds like he's been surrounded by a great group for a long time as well that he's been able to absorb a lot from.
The fact that he's willing to take that challenge is great to me, because it's almost a lost art. There's not a whole lot of people that are willing to buy a $200 locomotive and strip the paint off of it and start cutting into it to make changes on it. So it's that was part of the deal. I told him I'd finance the acquisitions if he wanted to try his hand on that. So I've painted myself into that corner. Now it's up to him to help me out and get these things built, because everybody needs more locomotives, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. And that's for a whole other podcast. Well, Sammy, thank you very much for being on Around the Layout. It was a pleasure to have you here and get to hear your story.
Thanks a whole lot for having me, Ray. It's been a blast, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. You'll find more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Learn more about the show and check out past and future episodes on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks again for hanging out with us around the layout.